Have you ever wondered about the incredible journey of surrogacy, the emotional ups and downs, the unbreakable bonds formed, and the life-changing moments experienced by both surrogates and intended parents? In this episode of the Golden Hour Birth Podcast, we're honored to share the story of Joyce, a woman who not only became a surrogate twice, but also found her calling in guiding others through their own surrogacy journeys. As a mother of three, Joyce's path to surrogacy began with a simple question. What is 40 weeks of her time compared to giving someone else a lifetime of happiness with their own child? Through her own words, Joyce will take us on a journey filled with love, challenges, and incredible connections. From the chaotic joy of carrying twins for her husband's aunt to the bond formed with her second set of intended parents over 9 months. Joyce's story will leave you inspired and in awe of the power of surrogacy. But Joyce's journey didn't end there. Discover how a seed planted in her heart grew into a passion for helping others as a case manager at a surrogacy agency. So, how does someone go from being a surrogate to finding their life's purpose in guiding others through this incredible journey? Let's dive into Joyce's story and find out. The Golden Hour Birth Podcast, a podcast about real birth stories and creating connections through our shared experiences. Childbirth isn't just about the child. It's about the person who gave birth, their lives, their wisdom, and their empowerment. We're Liz
and Natalie,
the Golden Hour Birth Podcast, and we're here to laugh with you,
cry with you,
and hold space for you. Welcome to the Golden Hour Birth Podcast. I am your co-host, Liz.
And I'm your co-host, Natalie. And tonight we have Joyce on. She is a mama of three living right outside of Kansas City, Missouri. So yay to Missouri. And she is a case manager at Fairfax Surrogacy. Like I said, mama of three and a 2 times gestational surrogate. So I'm so excited to have our first surrogate on. Thank you so much for coming on tonight, Joyce.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm so excited. Yes, go Missouri. I mean, we couldn't have had a better year. We won the Super Bowl again. We have Taylor Swift now. I mean, what else? What else can we do? We're here, Kansas City, loud and proud.
Yeah. Go Taylor's boyfriend.
Go Taylor's.
I bet you never break up, literally. So if you want to go ahead and tell listeners a little bit about you and your family.
Yeah, of course. So I am a mother of 3, and I'm married to my junior high school sweetheart. We met in 7th grade, fell in love as you do in 8th grade. What else are we doing? And we started our family young. We had our first baby at the very young age of 18. Our second baby 2 years after that at 20, and then our third and final baby when we were 23. I am a case manager, like you mentioned, for Fairfax Surrogacy. It is a beautiful industry full of ups and downs and everything in between. And I've used my personal journey for not only surrogacy, but in motherhood and just life in general to kind of fuel my abilities in this industry. And I take my role super serious. And I'm very grateful for those that allow me to be part of their journey.
Absolutely. So kind of going back, we were just talking off the record a little bit about your births and postpartum yourself. So if you want to kind of go ahead and tell us a little bit about the first to third and how that whole birth changed for you.
Yeah, definitely. With our first kiddo, we had just finished high school. We were looking to kind of start our lives, but we had been together for so long that when you're young and you're not necessarily preventing pregnancy, you're basically preparing for one. So that's what happened. We got pregnant, but we had already pretty much settled down in a way. I mean, as much as one does at 18, I had decided, okay, this is what we're doing with our lives. 2 years, not even 2 years, about a year after our son was born, we bought our first home. It's a home that we still live in. It's beautiful. We love where we live. Very cookie cutter neighborhood. So we just fell into parenthood. Younger people say, oh my gosh, teen parenting is so hard. Yes, but so is parenting at any age, I think. And I choose to look at it as I'm grateful that we got to meet our kids earlier in life. But so with our first son, a lot of, people had already had children in our life. We had relatives that had had their children, and I kind of went to them as far as, okay, what do I do? What do I eat? What do I avoid? I did everything in the What to Expecting book. I did it as best as I could. I avoided any sort of deli meats. I stayed out of the cheese aisle entirely during my pregnancy. I wanted to do everything by the book, and not really having life experiences at that point. I only had a book to go off of and what other people had told me. So all I knew of birth was that you wanted the epidural. That's what you're going to do. You're going to get there. You're going to tell them to give you the epidural. So I didn't even consider a natural birth or an unmedicated birth because I just assumed it would be so incredibly painful that this is what I had to do. It's just it's in the book. Do it. So I get all the way through my pregnancy. I'm about 4 days away from birth or from my due date. And I remember sitting on the couch and we were watching The Bachelor way back in 2009. And it was after the rose ceremony. So it was this really big deal on The Bachelor where he had chosen one girl and I didn't like her. So that was, my part of it. But then afterwards, he comes on. It's like an after the show special where he takes the rose back and gives it to the other finalist. And
Jason Mesnick.
I was like, what was it?
Jason Mesnick, right?
How do you? I think yeah. Like that name is burned into my brain. Seriously, he caused me to go into labor, because he owes me like child support at this point, but. I remember being like so just emotional in the moment because of everything that had happened. I assume, and it could have just been like coincidence, but my water broke at home, very much out of the movies. Like I was just kind of standing there in a puddle and like confused and calling for my husband. And he's, running and like slipping on hardwood floors and like grabbing the house phone and like deli meat from the fridge. And he's like, what do I get? Where do we go? And I'm like, calm down. Like I'm coaching him to the car and like it was just a whirlwind. So what I know now, what I didn't know then was when your water breaks, that cushion to help with the pressure of the contractions kind of goes away. Like that water is no longer there. And so about 15 minutes after my water breaking, I started to feel these waves and I'm like, oh, this is contraction. These are happening. And it went from tolerable to almost feeling like I couldn't breathe so very quickly. On the way to the hospital, my contractions were hitting so hard and so rapidly that I was like, okay, now I see why people say epidural. This is just normal. Like I can't even see straight. So we get to the hospital. I get the epidural. I was in labor a total of 4 hours. My water broke at 8:56 p.m. My son was born at 12:56 a.m. So he came into this world quickly. He came in sunny side up. So I had so much back labor and I thought, again, first baby, this is all normal and natural. I'm playing tug of war, literally holding onto a towel and my OB is holding the other end. And that's how she's coaching me to push because my epidural was strong and I didn't know what I was doing. And so I had 4th degree tears afterwards and it was intense. He was big. He was 7 pounds, 9 ounces. Perfect blonde hair, Hercules looking baby. Absolutely gorgeous. But I absolutely struggled postpartum with just trying to understand what my body was going through. I didn't anticipate the labor being so quick, nor so painful, nor really having any guidance. I had the epidural, but it worked too good. I didn't feel anything, which is very hard in labor. So without knowing what I was pushing or what I was doing, I was internally hurting myself because when you don't feel it, you just do it. So that was rough. My husband was incredibly supportive and we kind of got into a rhythm and figured it out very quickly. So we settled down 3 days before our son's first birthday. I found out I was pregnant again. So that was a little bit of a shock, but also at the same time, again, not preventing. At this point, we have family. We're building our family. And we were one of the families that didn't have to try. I did not struggle with infertility. We had to try to prevent if we didn't want children versus the opposite. So our second son came to be, and at that point, towards the end of the pregnancy, I was thinking a little bit more about my first birth and what I wanted to do differently. I decided to just kind of let my body ease into whatever may happen versus being scared of what may happen. So his was very similar. I remember starting at 38-ish weeks. I remember feeling some labor, I remember these feelings. This is happening. It's not as intense because my water hadn't broken. We get to the hospital, and in triage, you're like, well, let's check you. You're 38 weeks. You're having some contractions on the monitor. They checked me and I'm at a 7. So I'm already way past where I was with our first, and I'm doing great. I'm coasting. This is perfect. I get into the room and I had some nurses who I think were well-meaning, but also not well-informed. And there's a big difference. So she very quickly offered an epidural. And I said, no, I had one with my first. I think I'm going to see what I can do. And she goes, oh, don't be a martyr. I remember that so clearly in my head. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I did. I got the epidural at a 7, and it worked, but on only one side. So I still felt pretty much everything. And again, my son's labor was 2 hours maybe from when we got to the hospital to when he was born. Super quick. My body was just like,
wow, fast.
I know, it was fast. Yeah, it was super quick. I was, 1 minute I'm at Target checkout, the next minute I'm holding a baby. So it went so fast. I was like, okay. So he was bigger, as babies typically go. So first was 7'9", second was 8'3", born at 38 weeks. So less time in, more weight coming out. Third was very similar, but from the very moment I found out I was pregnant, I wanted to do everything differently. And that could have contributed to my lifestyle at the time, because at that point, having 2 boys, having my husband work full time, I'd kind of really settled into motherhood. And I think the term was crunchy. I don't consider myself a crunchy mom. Not necessarily, but we did things differently. I was letting my kids figure things out in life. I was very selective on what we were feeding the kids and myself, and just trying to get out of mainstream, just really kind of live easier, if that makes sense. And so I had gotten into a group of mothers, and like a social media Facebook group type thing. And a lot of them had talked about utilizing a doula for their birth. They talked about hypno babies, prenatal yoga. I was just fascinated by all of these options for pregnancy. I'm like, I could take prenatal yoga. What is that about? So I did. Everything I could get my hands on, I did. And I hired a doula, and she really helped me to understand my body more than I already kind of knew. She's like, you need to be empowered. This is your birth. This is you bringing your child into this world. You guys are working as a team. Utilize that. Make it what you want it to be. And so I did. We used hypno babies. Hypno babies, if you're not familiar, is just a hypnotic technique that helps in labor, in active labor, even as your body's preparing. And it just uses different ways to relax the mind and body in high stress moments. And to this day, I still use it. Sometimes the day is just really stressful, and I just drop my little finger down and I just shut down. Like, oh, this is so useful, even not pregnant. So, it's great, the stuff we learn. So yeah, my daughter's labor came on at 38 weeks, just like her brother. It came on slow. My husband was about 2 hours away working. And because of my previous 2 birthing experiences and how rapid they came on, calling him, come home, it's time, baby's on her way. I was pregnant with a girl after 2 boys. So it was all different all the way around. So he's racing home, and we get in the car, we get the boys off to our sitters, and we're making a beeline for the hospital. we get there and I'm checked. And at first I didn't want to be checked. So I did wait about an hour after getting there. We were just listening to my body and seeing the contractions. Finally, they checked me and I was comfortable with it. And they're like, oh, you're at like a 4. And I was like, wow, okay. Probably could have stayed home. And I did consider going back home at that moment, but they pulled the, 4 is active labor. We want to monitor, stick around. So I did. I took advantage of the space I had. I turned the lights down. I asked the nurses to step out and then I would reach out to them if things changed. I owned that birthing space. And it was so different than my first 2 births. In my first 2 births, I felt like a spectator. I felt like a very much out of body experience. Even though I was the one experiencing it, I was not in control. I was following the lead of others. This time around, I took the reins, and I remember having a conversation with my daughter, who at that point was still in womb. And I said, we're going to do this. You and we're going to rock this out. We don't need anybody but your dad and my favorite doula. We're going to get this done. And that's what we did. It definitely did not go as fast as my previous births. She took her time. And thinking back, it was because there was no medication. There's nothing. This is just me and my body figuring it out. So her labor was 21 hours from the moment I checked in to the moment she was born. I'd say active labor, when I was really feeling it and really kind of in the groove, maybe 4 hours. So she came into this world medicated free, nothing. I didn't take anything. And I was confident in that decision, even after the nurses pushed. And they do. They always push. Most of the time it's kindness or they're wanting to be supportive. So it was hard for a people pleaser to say no. And I kept having to tell myself, I want this. I'm going to make this happen for us, not only for me, but for my daughter. So my experience of birth unmedicated was something it was amazing. That I don't think there's words even to describe it other than I was not pushing. My body was pushing. When it came time, it was like a reflex. I was just giving in to what my body was naturally doing. There was no screaming. There was no crying. There was no drama. It was just peaceful. And she came into this world. She didn't cry at first. And that was okay because her APGAR was great, but she came in very peacefully. That has certainly changed in the last decade of her. She is not as peaceful as she was moments after birth. But that's okay. But we did things differently. Even from the moment she was born, we waited to cut the umbilical cord, which I didn't know was an option before. And I noticed immediately her color was different than her brother's. When my 2 sons were born, their color was a little off. They looked a little alienish. She didn't. She was pink and she was covered in vernix. And I said, don't rub it off. Let me rub it in. Like there were so many things that were so magical about her birth, so empowering, not only for me as a woman, but hopefully one day for her as a woman, that she maybe remembers parts of it or epigenetically experiences, how that day felt for the both of us. That could just be me on some weird tangent, but it was, it was amazing.
I've never thought about that though. Like that is really freaking cute and special. Like that our daughters, all 3 of our daughters could possibly I don't know, maybe there's just something there. But getting emotional. That is just really freaking cute to think about.
Yeah. It's something when you experience one end of the spectrum where it's medicated, people are telling you what to do, you are just following someone else's lead. It's very detached. And I don't think my relationship with my children were different postpartum, but I feel like my relationship with myself and my instincts, and because when someone tells you how to birth, you're expecting them how to tell you how to parent. Clearly, they know more about you and your body than you do. So now what? How do I breastfeed? How do I raise a toddler? How do I change a diaper? All of these, you start to question your own very much capable abilities as a mother, as a person. So watching my daughter come into this world, knowing that my body did that and that doctor was just kind of there was great. I mean, he came in at the very, very last minute. I mean, he barely made it. And I remember telling my husband postpartum, we could have done this at home for way cheaper. So like just a thought. I've saved us a ton of money by switching to home birth. But it was amazing. She was born. They waited to cut the cord. They waited till it stopped pulsating. And even then a little bit longer. And then instead of laying them right to my chest, we laid her on my lower abdomen, and she did a breastfeeding curl, which sparked the most amazing 2-year breastfeeding journey I could ever have. My boys did not nurse nearly as long. And it was like a fight from day one, where it was just normal, natural. And that's just what she did. For me, it felt natural. We just nursed. She never had formula. I just let my body do what it did. And I didn't stress about it. I'm like, I'm not going to watch a clock. I'm going to watch your diapers, make sure, you're hydrated, but I'm not going to obsess about your weight every 5 seconds. The evolution of motherhood had kicked in hardcore by the time my third got there. And then it kind of catapulted me throughout. As far as parenting 3 kids, I'm like, all right, this is it. We got it. I got 3, and we're just going to figure this out. We're going to do life day by day. And here we are about a decade later. And so far, so good.
Yeah.
So
sounds like it. That's awesome. So
yeah.
if you want to kind of start from your thoughts about being a surrogate and how that journey started.
Yeah, definitely. Surrogacy was not something even in my head until I gave birth to our first son. So after the whirlwind of my water breaking at home, the bachelor causing that to happen, getting to the hospital and giving birth, my aunt had also made it to the hospital in time. She was in the room when my son was born. And my aunt is only 15 years older than I am, so we're close. She is unable to have children naturally. She has some health conditions that just prevents her from ovulating, and it's been a struggle for her to just even attempt to create a child of her own. And so I remember them placing my son on my chest, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this just happened, and I just did this, and he's here. And I looked at my aunt, and she was happy. She was overjoyed. But there was a void that I saw, and it was just unmistakable, that if she could be in my position right now, she would have her own baby. And so without even really thinking about it, I just kind of said, I'll have your baby. I'll have your baby for you. And so it was kind of a running joke. Everyone thought, oh my gosh, that epidural really kicked in, because she was telling other people she'd have their kids. So for a while it was funny until I continued to think about it. Like, it just kind of planted that seed. If I can do this, if I can carry a pregnancy, a healthy pregnancy that is minimal health risk to myself, and the baby comes out amazing and perfect, and I can do that for my own family, what is 40 weeks of my time for someone else to have a lifetime of their own baby with their own happiness, their own genetics? And so it kind of started as just a thought for a family member, but it very quickly turned into kind of a plan of action. Okay, let's really start to research this after our family is complete. And so when our daughter was born, just a few months after she was born, I was looking into the process, the difference between gestational surrogacy and traditional surrogacy. There are 2 types of surrogacies. Traditional is where the surrogate themselves is also contributing genetically by using her own eggs. So it's considered a planned adoption, but it's also referred to as traditional adoption or traditional surrogacy. I knew I didn't want to do that because I see my children every day, and I don't think emotionally I was going to be able to plan a genetic tie to a child. So gestational surrogacy is just where you are carrying the genetics of someone else and you're just the carrier, but so much more than that. So I chose that gestational surrogacy was the right path. I started looking into the qualifications of how do you become a surrogate? What do you have to be a surrogate? I read at that point the guidelines. There's some guidelines out there. Age was a factor. You have to be between the ages of 21 and 41. I was in my early 20s, so I was like, check. Your BMI has to be under 32, I think is the number now. My BMI was much lower than that, so I was like, okay, I got that. A lot of agencies want you to be done with your own family. So I was like, okay, I'm already on track for that. So I decided at that point to be proactive and to maybe connect with some agencies. I put a message out on social media. Later in the evening one night, I posted to my social media, hey guys, my husband, we're doing this. I'm going to be a surrogate. This is happening. If you know of anyone, if you're connected to an agency, if you even know of a family member that's looking, please reach out. So I put my phone down on the nightstand, and it was about 30 minutes later, I hear my phone ding. I was like, oh, okay. So I grab it and I look. It's my husband's aunt. And I'm like, what is happening? So one of those serendipitous moments, I chose to seek surrogacy because of my aunt, ended up caring for my husband's aunt. So it was beautiful and chaotic. And we met over dinner and we decided, okay, this is what I want the journey to look like. This is what you want the journey to look like. Everything coincides. This is going to be beautiful. A few months later, after we had all the things, you have to do medical screening, you have to have a psychological screening, you have to get legal contracts in place. We did all of that. And then we went to transfer. At that point, we transferred 2 embryos because that's pretty common. And then a few weeks later, we found out that it was twins. So I carried their twins for them, and it was beautiful and wonderful, slightly chaotic at times because I also had 3 children at home. The twins came into the world fast. We delivered in the OR because that's pretty common for twin births, but I delivered vaginally. So both babies came out. I didn't have to have a C-section. And they're family today. So they have a very unique understanding of their beginnings because most of their friends have a mom and a dad, which they do too. Most of them have mothers that carried them, whereas they had another person carry them. And they understand that in the simplest form because kids typically do get it a lot better than most adults. So it's been a wild ride to watch them go, from 2 perfect little embryos to a beautiful, healthy twin pregnancy to being toddlers and now big kids. So it was perfect and wonderful. And I loved it. I'm sorry.
How old are they?
They will be 8 in May.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Did you still
Yeah.
do like the natural route? And
That one, it was a little tricky because we delivered in the OR. And so I had guidance. I also had some preterm stuff happen. So nothing, they were born at right at 34 weeks. So they were early. They were bigger babies, over 5, over 6 pounds. Beautiful, wonderful, healthy. But because of my preterm labor, because of having some stuff happen in the beginning, they were like, we need to deliver in the OR. I had dilated prematurely, and I had stayed dilated prematurely for several weeks, past 4. I was actually at a 7 for a little while. Just stuck, just staying there. Like my body wasn't in labor. I wasn't contracting, but I just dilated. So, we went to the OR and we did place an epidural in, and we had it on a low setting because in the event that baby A was born naturally, baby B could have slipped and we would have ended up with a C-section. Luckily that didn't happen, but we did have that in place. I felt very much similar to my daughter's birth, whereas I felt when to push and how things worked. I was grateful that there was a bit of pain reliever in place, only because baby A came out perfectly and baby B, she didn't flip, but she kind of turned and her nose bone kept hitting my pelvic bone and she wasn't coming out. So the doctor said, okay, on the next contraction, we're going to turn her. And I'm thinking, how are we going to turn her? And then I found out they're going to internally turn her, which I rather that than have to go, 1 vaginal birth, 1 cesarean. So we did that. They were born within 22 minutes of labor onsetting. So that one was more on par to my first 2 births. But no, they came into this world and mom and dad took them immediately, which as a surrogate, I think all surrogates kind of live for that moment when you have gone through this pregnancy. You are not picking out names. You're not planning to decorate a nursery. The pregnancy actually kind of flies by because you're not so mentally caught up in everything. There are many times where I go to the store with all 3 kids in tow and someone would say, oh my gosh, you're pregnant and you have 3. And my son would say, oh, it's twins. And then, you get the looks and like people are like, oh my gosh, how are you going to do it? I'm like, oh, these aren't mine. They thought, the responses that surrogates come up with is a combination of being tired and pregnant and not wanting to deal with it, but also kind of being funny and just enjoying it. I had lots of those moments, lots of those, what is happening type of things, but it was amazing. And it kind of catapulted me into my second journey. What I did differently in my second surrogacy journey was I had an agency backing me. And had I carried for family again, I don't know if I would have gone that route necessarily, but I'm so grateful that I did with my second journey because it was logistically a 180. I wasn't thinking about the next step because someone else was doing that behind the scenes. I was able to create a very impactful, meaningful relationship with total strangers as I carried their daughter into this world. That's lifelong. I adore my intended parents that I carried for my second time around. Also my first time around. I love them too. My second time around, they were strangers before I knew them. Building that foundation in like 9 months, that's kind of what we have to make something happen. It was from day one, it was meant to be. We connected so quickly and they trusted my instincts. They were like, we love you, whatever you need to do, whatever you feel comfortable with. I did prenatal yoga. I did hypno babies again. I did everything to the T that I did with my daughter. My labor with her, my doula came over. I was feeling some things happening, some things shifting around 38 weeks, kind of my timer at that point. And I had her come over and I'm timing my contractions and she's like, stop looking at that. Don't look at your timer. Like your body's doing what it's doing. I'll watch you. Let's just hang out. So I did. I kind of forgot about what I was doing and just kind of hung out with her for a little bit. And it was like 30 minutes later, she's like, we should go for a ride, which was her way of saying, let's head to the hospital. So we did. We packed the car. We got everything inside. My husband was right there with us and we get to the hospital. And I'm at a 4. And I'm like, great. I've done this before. This is happening. We're happening. It's going great. And then everything just stopped. There was no more contractions. I was at a 4, almost a 5. My phenomenal OBGYN. And if you're in the Kansas City area, I recommend her to everyone. She comes in and she's like, what's happening? I was like, I don't know. She's like, get out of that bed. We're walking. You go walk. I was like, okay. So I get up, I'm walking the halls. My amazing doula is in contraction. She's kind of lifting baby and she's lifting my belly and kind of pulling it back to where the contractions are pushing onto my cervix and actually trying to get things happening. She's pulling out all the stops to try to help, but also not overwhelm me. So we go back to the room. It's been about an hour. They check me. I'm at a 5. Like, man, this is different. She's taking her time. So my doula grabs a sheet from the bed and she's wrapping it around me and she's like, we're going to just kind of hold baby in there a little bit, get some pressure down, make baby scooch down. And I turn on my Pandora. I've got the lights down low. My husband's there. Our intended dads are both there. Everyone's waiting for the show. And I felt it. I felt kind of like the pressure of it. And so I was like, man, what do I do? And so I wanted space, but I didn't know how to ask that of my intended dads. They were excited. They were ready for birth. They were ready to meet their daughter. But I knew that my body was stalling and I just needed space. And so I came up with something. I said, hey, the lights in here, the fluorescent rep lights are really bothering me. Do either of you have a pair of sunglasses I can wear? And they both kind of looked at each other and they're like, I don't think we have sunglasses. And I was like, that's okay. Maybe look at the gift shop and see if, or go check your car. So they did. They left. They were on a mission. They wanted to help. They wanted to be proactive in the labor. And they came back about 45 minutes later with about 10 pairs of sunglasses that they had bought. I still to this day have sunglasses from them. And I tell that story often in my role as a case manager when I'm talking to surrogates and I'm talking to intended parents about birth, because birth is wild. We're not going to know if baby's coming right, in 22 minutes or if baby's going to be here in 21 hours. So don't hold yourself to the expectation that you have to, everyone stay in the room. If you need to move, you need to get around, do it.
I love that story
Where
so
was
much though, because literally I can just like see and imagine two like guys running around being like, somebody need sunglasses or mom needs sunglasses, like, or not,
Yeah.
or surrogate.
Yeah. No, they were incredible. And they, as two dads to be, have no idea what is happening. They just want to be there. They're just happy to be there. They're terrified to be there. So as soon as I gave them a task that they could do, they were like, we full send. We will get you sunglasses. It was their life's mission at that point.
Love it.
So when I'm sharing this story with my intended parents and my surrogates, I remind them that it's okay to step away. Don't go buy 15 pairs of sunglasses. Just go to the food court or just kind of go. Don't have expectations other than labor is random and sometimes it goes very quick. Sometimes it goes very slow. But regardless, you all are together doing this. And so for my birth, it unfortunately didn't go as planned for my last birth. I dilated very slowly. It took roughly 30 hours for me to fully dilate, about 35 hours for me to fully dilate. And as soon as I was fully dilated, my OB says, okay, let's try to push. Are you feeling pushy? We can push. Still no medication. I did not have medication with her 35 hours into labor. And I said, okay, I think I can push. So I start pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, and nothing is happening. Nothing at all. And I remember at one point looking at my OB and she's like, you're tired. I said, I'm so tired. What is wrong? What is happening? And she's like, baby's not coming down at all. And we don't know why. Like, this is making me nervous. And you're tired. You're not able to do anything anymore. At that point, I was kind of in and out of consciousness because I had been in labor for such a long time and just so exhausted. So my OB, along with me and my consent and my husband's acknowledgement, opted for a C-section because we didn't know why baby wasn't coming down. And I had had 5 vaginal births before that with no problem, even a set of twins. So we get to the OR and my husband all of a sudden becomes a surgeon from Grey's Anatomy. Like he was telling people where to stand and like making sure that they're counting. Apparently you're supposed to count all utensils twice in the OR. I didn't know that. He knew that. I don't know where he found that out. Like Googling on the way to the OR. I don't know.
It really takes all with it. Just go into an empty.
Yeah. I was like, wow. Okay. So he was very protective. And the C-section was flawless. What we found out during the C-section is that she was forehead presenting. So instead of bending her chin down, tucking it in, she pushed it upwards. And so I was trying to birth this beautiful baby's head and it was bending backwards. So we got her out the safest way possible. And had I pushed harder or done something differently, it could have ended very badly. So nobody anticipates a C-section after natural labor or multiple vaginal births. So for me, it was jarring. It was an emotional roller coaster. I had postpartum shakes and no one told me. I had never really experienced even close relatives having a C-section unplanned. So I struggled. I struggled mentally with it. I felt like a failure. I felt like, oh my gosh, I told these intended parents that I'd bring their baby into the world. And I feel like I didn't. I felt like I messed up. Something was wrong with me. So it took a long time, months and months of me being postpartum to acknowledge the fact that birth is never going to be exactly how you plan it to be because it's birth. And you have to kind of give in to those situations and not blame yourself. C-section is not the easy way out. C-section is not, it's difficult. It's difficult for people to experience that weren't anticipating that route for their birth. So She was born perfect. She was the biggest baby of all, 8 pounds, 13 ounces, absolutely perfect. Again, as a surrogate, you anticipate the moment where the parents meet the baby. That didn't happen with this birth because we were in the OR. So they wheeled baby down the hall to meet her parents. And I was very grateful because the nurses recorded that moment for me. They knew that that was going to be special for me. So I have a video of them meeting their daughters for the first time and them getting her out of the isolette and handing them over, and they're just fawning over her and just absolutely in love. But the very first question out of their mouth was, "How's Joyce?"
Oh,
They wanted to know how I was. And that to this day, I go back and look at that video because it shows, again, the thought and mindset of intended parents. Of course, they're grateful and happy that their baby is here, but they wanted to know that I was okay, physically, mentally, emotionally. And then I did not meet her face to face until the next morning. So that was a little different too. However, they did not share her name with me the entire journey. I asked that they didn't. I feel like with surrogates have the spotlight kind of on them, just like every pregnant person typically does. And for intended parents, there's not a whole lot that they have of their own. And so I did this with my first set of intended parents with the twins. I did not know the twins' name until they were born. Same thing with my last surrogate baby. I asked that they hold it and keep it to themselves. And then when she's born, introduce me to your daughter. It was the most beautiful transition I could ever imagine. They wheeled her in the room. She's in this beautiful little she's in this little baby carrier. And they wheel her over to my bed, and they are like barely holding it together. Like they are trying so hard not to lose it. And they said, "We'd love to introduce you to," and they shared her name with me. And at that moment, everyone's crying. The baby starts crying. We're just all struggling, but it was amazing. And I recommend it to parents all the time. I'm like, your surrogate, we can come up with a nickname for baby. If you don't want to share the name and you want to wait till birth, I highly recommend it, because that transition from surrogate to intended parent introducing their child to you, who you've carried for the last 9 months, give that to them. Give them that moment, because it's amazing.
oh,
So
that's so much. It's so sweet.
I won't make you guys cry anymore tonight. I promise. That was the last of it.
That's really, really beautiful, Joyce. Oh, I love that.
Thanks.
So when did you start working with Fairfax, or when did you even kind of get into that role?
Full circle.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually after my second journey in 2018, I decided I needed to stay in this industry. Somehow, some way, I was going to stay where I was. And so I initially applied to the agency that I had been a surrogate at. They were not hiring at that moment, but they kind of gave me resources. Check in with this agency. We think that this agency's hiring. And so I actually started with another agency, a larger agency initially. It was great. I learned things. They were a little bit more corporate than I was looking for, especially as a former surrogate, but more so just someone just entering the field. And so I feel at this point in my career, I'm almost like Goldilocks in the 3 agencies. So I started with that one, really big, too big for me. My second agency was smaller on the West Coast. They had it together. They were wonderful. They were more just family oriented, and it was great, but it still wasn't the right fit. I felt like there were things that I needed and I wanted to grow in different ways, and they just weren't there. And so I landed at Fairfax Surrogacy in March of last year. So coming up on 1 year. And again, like Goldilocks and the 3 Bears, I have found my bed and I am laying in it. It is so amazing. It is the perfect balance of family and professionalism that I feel like I have a voice. Everyone at Fairfax is made up of former surrogates or intended parents or parents that utilized IVF to build their family. And so with that empathy, we guide our cases we feel. We're an extension of the journeys that we lead. And it's been amazing. I absolutely love what I do every day. And it's smaller. We're not inflated. We're not a giant agency. But we are very quality over quantity. And I'm grateful for that because I feel like I'm actually doing something in my journeys. I'm actually helping and part of something much bigger than myself.
Yeah. Oh. How,
Yeah.
in your second journey, how did they match you with the intended parents? How does that process work?
Yeah, that process is very interesting and it's very unique to the agency itself. So typically what happens is the surrogate will create a profile, and that profile is going to be made up of her family photos, maybe her history, how her and her spouse met, what she does for work, typically a video, because letters or a letter to her future parent and photos are great, but sometimes a video really kind of solidifies that personality. So I created my profile, and then I was shown profiles that mirrored mine. So profiles that had photos of the parents, videos, things like that. And I was able to select kind of off of that thought process. They matched me with parents who had similar interests, similar expectations for the journey, hopes of communication. My termination stance, that's a big one that a lot of families would like to match with someone who's, whether you're pro-choice or pro-life, I wanted to be sure that I was matching with someone who had the same stance as I did. And so it is an intricate, very detailed, especially as a case manager, it's very detailed. But for me, I was shown a profile, and I think at that point I'd probably been shown 2 or 3. And I chose my intended parents because not just reading their letter or looking at their photos, but I felt something like this is the beginning of something. It felt right. It felt like a puzzle piece that I had been searching for. And I could almost envision them as parents later on down the road. And what I had envisioned back then has 100% came to fruition. They are phenomenal intended parents. Parents at this point, no longer intended, just parents. And so that piece of it for me was very important. And so when I'm matching within our agency, it's important for me to factor in all of those different things. And I ask my intended parents to be transparent as much as possible. It's difficult, especially for maybe mom and dad intended parents, those that have experienced loss or infertility. To seek surrogacy is not always an easy choice. And so I'm very mindful of that when I'm talking to my families, and also when I'm matching them, to make sure that I'm matching them with a surrogate who's mindful of the journey that they've had and just wants to help them get to their baby. So matching is super important. I didn't have to wait too long to be matched. I think I was waiting maybe 6 or 7 months. Here at Fairfax, our matching times are less. They're about 4 to 6 months. And we work with clinics all over the country, parents all over the world, and surrogates all over the country as well. So very grateful for that.
I hope to be a surrogate in like the next few years, but we'll see what happens. But I just come across like an intended parents profile on my end, and I'm like, I'll carry for you. I read this.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like, what do you need? Like, I want to carry for everyone. I want to give everyone a baby.
Yep. That is exactly how every case manager ever feels. Not only as a surrogate, because I've done this, I know what it entails. I know what it's like to be a surrogate. So every time that I meet with intended parents, every time, without failure, I think at some point during our call, I'll do it. Mm-hmm. I don't say those words out loud, or else I'd be pregnant with 100 babies at this point. But I definitely think it. And I think that is what drives me so hard to find their surrogate. Because if I want to do it, then there's someone else who wants to do it. And I want to make that match happen. And I get almost a secondhand high from that experience, from those moments. I've been through this. I've experienced, the heartbeat confirmation with my intended parents in the room. I've experienced everything that surrogacy has to offer. And when I get to watch it play out with my families, It's like I live for those moments, but I also am very humbled by the sad moments because surrogacy is not all happy rainbow sunshine. It's fertility, whether it's, having a surrogate, an egg donor, a sperm donor, it's all fertility, and fertility is never guaranteed, no matter who is doing it. So when we have those moments, when we have those setbacks as a case manager, it affects me, and I have to kind of put my boundaries up because I don't want it to affect me so much that I can't function and complete the rest of my day's tasks, or I'm not as excited for someone else in their exciting moments. So that's been a challenge, I think, not only as a former surrogate, but just a person. These are hard, sad moments at times, but then we have the exciting moments and the happy moments. And it's like they've gone through trials and tribulations, and here we are on the big day, the birth. I've got 2 births coming up next week, and I am ecstatic. I feel I can't do anything. I'm, miles and miles away from where they are and where they're birthing, but I don't sleep. I've got my phone on. I'm like an on-call OB, just ready and waiting for them to, have this moment for themselves. The parents are bringing their baby home and becoming parents, but that surrogate is experiencing something so life-changing. To do something for someone else, something of this magnitude, it sits with you forever. You're humbled by your own experiences. You're like, wow, I just did this. I just brought life into the world for someone else. That is pretty cool.
Like, yeah. One of the most beautiful gifts you can get. I love the fact that you were like, introduced me to your baby. Like, oh my God, my heart. That's just, I like the icing on top. Like, you are a beautiful person, and I can tell how much like birth and surrogacy and completing families like gives you life, and I just see it all over you and like in your voice, and you are a beautiful person.
Thank you. That is, it's hard to take compliments. I think that's just the Midwestern in me. I'm like, stop it. But I am grateful. I will forever be grateful for this role that I stumbled into by pure chance almost. It was a thought. It was a seed that was planted, and here we are years later, and it is something that I am very grateful for, and I could probably talk about it all night. My husband has to very quickly kind of pull me away from the cashiers at Target. I will just get to going. So,
yeah, you could hear the passion in how you talk about it.
Well, thank you guys for giving me a platform to share and to chat about it. It's I absolutely love what I do, and anytime that I get a chance, I jump on it. So if you ever want to know more, or if you're ever curious, I recommend checking out fairfaxsurrogacy.com. That's a lot of like kind of our blogs and kind of where we sit. I have a webinar coming up on Thursday where I talk about the ins and outs of surrogacy with my coworker, co-case manager. But no, I'm an open book, and I think you kind of have to be when you are helping to build families. You have to be as open as possible and transparent. So I'm grateful you guys gave me that opportunity tonight.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on. And then if people are interested in connecting with you personally, how can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. fairfaxsurrogacy.com is where you can connect with me. I have my own kind of little area under who we are. But also emails are great. info@fairfaxsurrogacy.com. That's going to go to me. And I'm very much comfortable just doing a quick phone call sometimes. It's hard to connect with a total stranger and share your life story unless it's not, which I'm open to that as well. But sometimes a text or an email is just the beginning that you need, that starting point. And I go at other people's paces. I don't have any agendas and try to move things along because I am not building my family. You are. And I'm just here to help.
Thank you so much. It was so awesome to have a surrogate and just everything. Yeah, just a whole new perspective. It was so great.
Thank you guys for having me. It has been very much the highlight of my week. I'm grateful for you both.
Thank you. We're grateful for you.
Of course.
We'll see you next episode. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Golden Hour Birth Podcast. We hope you've enjoyed our discussion and found it insightful and beneficial. Remember, the Golden Hour Birth Podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you. If you appreciate the content we bring you each week, consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform or sharing the show with your friends and family. Your support helps us reach more people and continue creating valuable episodes. If you have any questions, suggestions, or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us on our website, www.goldenhourbirthpodcast, or connect with us on social media. We value your feedback and want to make sure that we're delivering the content you want to hear. Before we sign off, we'd like to express our gratitude to our incredible guests who joined us today. We are honored that they trust us enough to be so open and vulnerable. We're grateful for their time and willingness to share their stories with us. If you're interested in taking the conversation further with us, join us on our Facebook group, The Golden Hour Birth Circle. We'll be back next week with another exciting episode, so be sure to tune in. Until then, stay golden and remember to take care of yourself. We'll catch you on the next episode of the Golden Hour Birth Podcast. Bye!